it's tragic.
And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
In the early 90s, Nickelodeon was kid everything.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MF Uncensored. Don't forget, if you guys are listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, basically anywhere you get your podcast. If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you guys leave a like down below and subscribe for more completely mediocre content. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Paul, and with me in the actual studio because, well, this one's an interesting one. We're gonna have Sean. Sean, how are you today?
We're gonna have Sean. We have settled for Sean. I am sorry, Paul.
Sean, you are never settling. You are always just a pip and a joy.
Pip and a joy.
Pip and a joy. Pip and a joy.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you for having me.
I was trying to be very professional for this episode.
No, I fully understand, and it's good to be back in the studio. So we have a tough one to talk about today, and we're gonna do a good job.
So for those of you guys who didn't read the title of the episode, we are doing a follow-up, and for those of you guys who are unaware, we had an episode discussing this specific topic of cinematic adventures. It is actually our most viewed episode on YouTube with almost 30,000 views, which has been really cool. A lot of new subscribers. So if you guys came from that episode, thank you. And that's one of the biggest reasons we wanted to do a follow-up. And we are talking Quiet on the Set Part 2. And the reason we're doing that is because after the initial airing, a lot of things came out. A lot of other cast members, a lot of other people started speaking up about their experiences working on Nickelodeon to the point where they did a follow-up episode. They titled it Episode 5, and they put it with. So if you're watching it on Max, it's actually with the show.
Yeah,
it is very different though than the rest of the season. So really quick, for those of you guys who aren't aware, Quiet on the Set came out, and it tells the story about the toxic nature of Nickelodeon, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it focuses on three main parts. One is Brian Peck and his sexual assault of Drake Bell, right? So that was like a really big thing that came about, and Drake Bell, for the first time ever, came out and said
bravely,
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, he came out and he's like, "I'm the kid. I'm who pressed charges against him all these years ago." And then we also had information on Dan Schneider and just the way that he was
the toxic work environment that he had created.
And then there was a couple of other predators on set, and also just kind of the behaviors that happen. And like this thing exploded, especially on social media, and it was all over the place. So really quick, Sean, just initial reactions on Quiet on the Set.
On the first 4 episodes?
Yeah, we'll go first for episode first.
I mean, it was. So people have come out and said, like, my childhood has just been turned upside down. I won't go that far because a lot of these shows, were a little beyond what I had watched. I did not watch a lot of the shows that were focused on in this episode. It is a hard watch. It is unbelievable. It is disheartening. It is just absolutely vulgar. And it's just unbelievable. I mean, there's no excuse. You can't excuse anything that happened in those first 4 episodes. I mean, it is unbelievable how a network has 3 child predators all working for the network at the same time. You have, a man in Dan Schneider who, yes, he created some of Nickelodeon's most iconic TV shows, but how he was just allowed to just create this horrible working environment, not just for the adults on the set. As we've learned in the previous episodes, there was a couple of female writers on the Amanda Show, and they were just mistreated horribly. But again, these are children. These are children aged anywhere from 10 to 13, and you're doing jokes with them that are very adult. Again, very adult to us watching it now, and stuff like that. And it's just, I mean, it is unbelievable, and it was really just eye-opening. Really was.
So we discussed at length. There's a very fine line of adult humor in anything that kids watch, right? Because the ideal television show or the ideal movie is something that the parents can also watch along with them.
Yes.
We don't get rated G movies anymore. Like they are a super rarity.
Even animated films, yeah, it's very rare you get a G movie. Most of the time it's got to be PG.
So, and like that's a good thing, right? It shows a little bit more. But like you watch a movie like Shrek, where, and I like to use Shrek as my reference point, where they actively have adult innuendo and adult, like Donkey has sex with the dragon. Let's just say it. Like we all know that's what he did.
Hmm.
But at the same time, Shrek is still a movie for kids and families. I always say that the way that they try and kind of explain it is they want little Timmy to watch it. They
Hmm.
want little Timmy's big brother to want to watch it, and they
Yeah.
want Timmy's parents to enjoy watching it at the same time.
Pixar was not as over the top as Shrek was, but Pixar was also in the vein of trying to have it both kids and adults being able to watch at the same time, and both getting different, jokes going at it.
Well, Pixar is very good at also knowing their audience. A lot of
Yeah.
their audience has grown up with these things. Like we watched the movie, what is it, Turning Red,
Yep.
and we thoroughly enjoyed it. Me and producer Melanie. Like it is a movie. Literally, though, it is it's about menstruation and puberty and all these things. Like
Mhm.
that's what the movie's about. But
Mhm.
they do it in a way that makes it digestible. Inside Out, and now Inside Out 2 is coming out. Like
Mhm.
they deal with a lot of different issues. So,
Coco deals with
oh,
the
Coco.
afterworld.
Oh yeah. So we go back to this and let's start with Drake Bell. So Drake Bell is obviously the biggest draw point of this series. And for episode 5, they bring him back via Zoom.
Mhm.
And this episode is a lot more interview and reaction.
Yeah.
Like, hey, did you guys expect this to happen afterwards? And what has happened since? So Drake Bell, he comes on, and one of the biggest things is that 41 people wrote letters of support for
Brian Peck.
Brian Peck during his sentencing. Now, since this documentary aired, a lot of celebrities were like, we had no freaking idea what we were writing letters of support for,
Mhm.
right? But it doesn't excuse the fact that you guys were still in the courtroom,
Yeah.
like sitting there.
It's still a tough listen when Drake says he walks into the courtroom and Brian Peck's side of the courtroom was just filled with very well known faces, and then on his side it was just him, his mom, and his brother.
Yeah.
It really is hard to hear that, and then they go back to that obviously in episode 5. The big, let's be honest, the two big names that have come out of that have been Ryder Strong and Will Friedle, who we both know from Boy Meets World. They have openly admitted on their podcast of their own, Pod Meets World, that what happened, how it happened, and that they feel terrible about it.
Mhm.
They even they air a clip of Will speaking to it about it on this episode. Um, I don't know. Like we were not there. We were not there to find out what exactly these people were told.
Right.
Okay. Does that excuse them? At the time, no. But what should have happened after the trial and after Brian Peck was sentenced, those 41 people should have all apologized to Drake Bell, should have called him, sent him a letter, personally gone to him and said, I am so sorry. I
Yeah.
did not know that this is what he did when I wrote that letter. If I had known that, I would never have written that letter.
So
and
I'll-
that didn't
yeah.
happen. And
I'll-
that's a problem.
I'll even go a step backwards, right? So this past week we had a historic moment in the passing of O.J. Simpson out of nowhere, like out of left field. Suddenly he was just
Well,
like,
yeah,
he's dead. Okay, so you look at the O.J. trial and the people that firmly believe he was innocent, guilty, he was guilty, but like same thing, right? You had a ton of people that were there supporting him.
Mhm.
If you're at a sentencing hearing, guess what? The verdict is done. They have already said you are guilty of this. It is not the same event. It is not guilty. All right, what's the sentence? No, there is a time period afterwards. He brought those people there after, and they knew, like
Yeah.
they were there knowing that he was convicted of those charges. I mean, it's only 2 out of like the 12 or something like that.
Doesn't
but
matter.
Still,
Yeah.
like he was a convicted child abuser.
Yeah.
And they
And
still sat there.
And some of them even got him another job on another show
On Dak and Cody.
with kids.
Yeah. I can
That-
the letters I can understand. Not that I'm condoning them. I'm saying, like I said, the example I used, Sean is my closest friend. Sean and Ronnie are brothers to me. If I were to call Sean from, let's say, when I was in Hawaii, I called Sean from a Hawaiian prison and said, Sean, I need you to tell them that I'm a stand-up guy. He's not going to ask what I did because he's my closest friend. Ronnie would actually tell a better story than whatever I did. He would lie to those people. I understand that if you, in Hollywood especially, you know somebody who's like, hey, I need help with this. He could have said, I got a speeding ticket and I'm going to traffic court. Can you write a letter saying I'm a stand-up guy?
Yeah.
They weren't, a lot of the people who wrote letters weren't there. That's why they wrote letters. Any person who was sitting in that courtroom, though, and they haven't said a lot about who was actually there. I don't think,
Will, he admits in the clip you hear him. He says he was sitting there,
and he had no clue why.
and he
Like,
had no clue why.
so, but again, if you're sitting, it's already done. Like,
I know.
It blows my mind. I know he has made some peace with some of the people, but nobody's actually like reached out and apologized directly to him.
No,
But he
because
does.
he said Drake said he even worked with Will on Spider-Man,
Yeah.
on the cartoon. Now that's, I don't know if they were in the same room together, but he says there were opportunities there. It didn't happen. And again, Drake does a good job of not like calling anyone out
Which I respect.
personally,
Yes.
and like dragging their name through the mud. He could very well have done that, and honestly, I would have been like, okay, he has every right to do that for what happened. But he is very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Stand up in a way. He's not personally calling out anybody. He's basically, as a whole, he's saying nobody has come really out and said anything to me. He still just doesn't believe that it happened. He still doesn't believe that all those people supported Brian Peck.
Yeah. Like, so Friedel on the podcast, he literally says, look at that we're sitting in a courtroom on the wrong side of everything. The victim's mother turned and said, look at all the famous people you brought with you, and it doesn't change what you did to my kid. And Friedel said he had a moment of realization and wondered, what the hell am I doing here? Right. Tom DeSanto, a producer from X-Men, recently told people he wrote a letter of support with incomplete information, would not have written that letter if given all the information regarding the accusations. Not a whole lot of people have like come out and been like, we didn't. There's been a lot of silence.
There has been a lot of silence. Tell us what the information you were given. What information were you given?
Yeah.
Like, who reached out to you? Did Brian reach out to you? Did his lawyers reach out to you? Who reached out to you? What did they tell you? Did you ask questions? I mean, just let's hear that. I mean, who was it? The mother from Growing Pains in the previous episodes. It's in her letter. She openly thinks that he was that Drake Bell like tricked Brian Peck, and that's the reason why this has happened.
It's a crafty 14-year-old seducing an adult male.
I mean, like,
stop it.
yeah,
Like,
so,
come
like,
on. Hollywood's messed
Did
up.
they know? Did these people know that a child was involved? Did they know that? I don't know. Until they speak up, we won't know. And are they gonna speak up? At this point, if they haven't spoken up by now, I don't think they're gonna.
It is a testament to what happens, the fact that nobody's from that other side is coming out to defend themselves, because I hate to say it, everything Drake Bell is saying is 100% true then.
Yeah.
It's one thing if somebody comes out and they say, hey, this happened to me, these people were involved, and those people were like, no, we weren't. Nobody's denied anything about
No,
this.
no.
They're not it's an affirmation by being quiet.
Mhm.
Like, by not saying anything, denial, acceptance, apologies, you're admitting that this happened.
Yeah.
So, speaking of people who are reaching out, now this one blew my mind. All right, this is the second biggest revelation from the entire thing. So they brought back some of the cast members that were interviewed to get their reactions. And
Giovanni Samuels, and I apologize, I can't remember the other.
Brian Hearn.
Brian Hearn.
Yep. So Giovanni Samuels revealed that before, like a week or two before Quiet on the Set aired, Dan Schneider himself reached out to her and asked for a quote of support.
So he knew what was coming.
He knew that she was on the show.
Okay. So he knew what she was on the show, and he was hoping that she would be sort of his
advocate.
And she was basically he would be like, well, you had a good time on like I didn't do anything, and she's like, I was terrified of you.
Yes.
You could create careers, you could end careers, so it was, you heard that, and they spliced together reaction shots from the two of them watching the sort of follow-up responses from Dan Schneider, how
Who's still in his $30 million mansion.
so yeah. And I don't even know who was interviewing him, like what that was. Was that like a actual,
Might be his own show. It
I
might be
don't
somebody
know.
else. Yeah, we don't.
But you know, it was they're watching it and their reaction, and Brian brings up the point, goes like, this guy was an actor. Like,
Yeah.
how are we supposed to believe anything he says? Like,
I'm not playing devil's advocate, but anybody could say the exact same about these people.
that's true.
So I don't
That's
want to. I
absolutely
don't want to.
true.
Like I get
But
what
that
he's
was his
saying.
response. He
Yeah,
was like, this guy was an actor.
but he
before
also breaks down the entire performance of Dan Schneider.
Oh, yeah.
Like the way that he's talking, the inflection, the this and
But
that. Like
how, in at least in the iteration of all that they were on, how they felt so separated from the rest of the cast in terms of the people in management, the people above, the African American actors, and they, of course, they show a clip of Dan Schneider saying, "Oh, but I started Keenan and Kel's career," and and Brian has a great reaction that goes like, I was like, he forgot about us again. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't even bring our names up. He just goes to the fact that, oh, well, I had Keenan and Kel on my show, so of course
I'm culturally diverse.
of
Come on,
course, like
that's like saying I have a black friend.
yeah. I mean,
Like-
it's. I mean, you're watching this and you're just like, dude, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Just shut up.
So speaking of which, another big revelation, and it was interesting to see the reaction of the cast members who saw this. Right, so we are shown a clip that was cut out from the original airings,
episodes,
and it's a clip from former The Amanda Show actor Raquel Below.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm saying her last name right. I really hope I am. And she recalls doing a skit called The Literals. And I remember the Literals from The Amanda Show, where they did everything literally, thus the name The Literals. And they did repeated takes of Amanda Bynes spitting water in her face. And you're spitting in this girl's face over and over again. And she says, eventually I got like, everybody's laughing, everybody finds it funny and all these things. By the third time, she was so mad that the director took her off to the side and said, breathe in, breathe out. She's the star of the show. And to keep her cool. Now, we have heard plenty of stories and we've seen plenty of examples of the stars, right? The big names
Mhm.
having either meltdowns or being treated like there are. Christian Bale had his huge meltdown on the set of Terminator Salvation, right? And then he went on and he apologized for it. And you kind of understand, but
Mhm.
at the same time, you still condone it. And I get like the star of the show is going to be treated differently than not the stars of the show. Like
Yeah.
I hate to say it, right? A lot of accommodations are made for the stars of these shows. And I will never, ever, though, believe that I don't think Amanda Bynes was in the wrong for it necessarily because she's a kid too. And in her world, it was probably just being funny because all the adults are laughing. But it is some racist shit.
Mhm.
And you get the reaction of the two cast members because they were also black, and they were like, we had no idea about this.
Yeah.
And just, it was heartbreaking. It was gut wrenching.
Yeah, I mean, you had her. I don't remember Soledad O'Brien was the interviewer.
Yes.
In the Drake Bell section, she openly asked him, like, what do you think about what's happened to Amanda Bynes over the last decade, and is that a reason? Do you think that's a cause of something that happened? I mean, he's honest. He's like, I don't know. I haven't spoken to Amanda in a long time. I have no idea if she was the victim of something that drove her towards this. But I mean, we get a little more of that in the original episode, so there's like no real extra information coming in this one. But yeah, it's you hear this and you're just like, I agree with you. I don't think like Amanda Bynes is in the wrong, and the director. So the way she puts it, the actress Raquel, that the director goes, she's the star of the show. That makes it sound like Amanda Bynes was like, I'm just going to continually spit it in this girl's face, and no one's going to stop me.
Right.
Like, so it's weird to hear that, and I feel for her, like I really do, and I'm like, that's something that again the people in charge should be like, okay, We did it 3
Pump
times.
the brakes.
We did it 3 times. We don't need to do this again. Like that's
You don't hear a lot of stories about Amanda Bynes being a diva on set or anything along those lines. Like you hear sometimes stories like Ariana Grande, especially after she got really famous, like how she could be a little bit of a diva. But I can't imagine what fame does to a person. As much as we joke about like becoming famous, podcasters, YouTubers, and hopefully one day it does like, comment, subscribe. But I cannot imagine. We did our honeymoon. Not me and Sean.
I was about to say, like, oh,
Plus, it would be super romantic. But my wife and I, when we went on our honeymoon, we splurged a little bit because due to COVID, we had to push our wedding back, so we had time to save. And we did the butler package, where we actually had 2 butlers, and we had a lot of trouble interacting with that. Like we ended up taking selfies with one of our butlers and like just having a good time. But it was very strange to have somebody waiting on us. Very strange to have somebody calling and be like, "Hey, what do you need? Like, what can I do for you?" And then just doing things around the room, like running baths and stuff like that. That one was weird. I don't want to talk about it. But anyway, he stood in there too. No,
Jeeves, run my mouth.
get out of here, you. So let's talk about some of the other big revelations. So we had another former All That member actually come on, and that was Shane Lyons. I remember Shane Lyons.
I remember Shane Lyons. Do you remember the SVU episode that he was on?
I do not.
Oh, that was that one where it was him and another kid raped a adult woman and they were put on trial. The actual one that did the crime is tried as a kid. Shane Lyons' character, I don't remember why, but they choose to try him as an adult.
Interesting.
And he loses.
Oh,
and he ends up going to jail. It was a tough episode to watch because the kid is just like, I mean, he plays it so well.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing the commercial and you see a clip of him. I mean, I wouldn't have recognized him, but once he started talking,
he looks great.
Yeah, I mean, but he was not even involved in the first 4 episodes.
Right.
Like, there's no it's not him. It's just him being interviewed by Soledad O'Brien, and then Giovanni and Brian come in, and the 3 of them are reunited,
which was nice to see. Like, obviously they still have a good relationship, but Shane Lyons mentions a couple of things that he was very uncomfortable. Well, first of all, he was uncomfortable watching the show, and he's like, people need to talk, right? They need to come out and talk about this, which I completely agree with 10 trillion%. And I think that these people should still be held accountable, but that's just me.
I think he had the best thing to say about everything at the end there, where it's like, I hope this is not just a flash in the bank.
Yeah.
I want this to enact change.
Right.
Like, this should not just be, oh, we watched it, it was horrible to watch, but we're just going to go on with our merry lives. Like, no, things need to change in terms of children's television and how children are dealt with on television,
right,
in Hollywood.
So he goes on to tell a story very specifically. He does say that nothing ever happened to him physically in those regards, but Brian Peck definitely had some inappropriate conversations with him and made some veiled passes at him. He goes over a very a longer story about blue balls, and we're not going to get into details on this one because he thought they were racket balls, and we're going to leave it at that. But he even says, he's like, I think back now as a 36-year-old, would I ever have a conversation with a 13-year-old boy like he had with me? No. That is the sign of a predator. I hate to say it, that you don't have adult conversations with children. Like, that's just, it's not right. So it was nice to hear somebody who could relate and bring something to that, the table, but also like, I'm just happy that nothing happened to him. But there are some good things that came out of this. Drake Bell, apparently it helped mend his relationship with his father. He released a new music video based on all this, and it's hard to watch.
Yeah. He even brings up how, like, a lot of people have been attacking his mother after the airs, because the episode does make it seem like the mother just didn't care.
Right.
It had to feel like, oh, the mother was just like, I can't be bothered with driving you back and forth to rehearsal. So that's how Brian just weaseled his way. And he's just like,
it's not what happened.
It's not what happened.
I think it's just poor editing from.
Yeah. So I was glad to hear that. And he was just like, I am close with my father. I am close with my mother. He saw an opening and he was able to just smooth talk his way, and my mother fell for it.
Yeah. But one of the biggest things that came out of this, and I know you and I were pretty upset to hear this, the Mark Summers bit.
Yeah.
So,
well, we didn't come out of this episode. There's no mention of it in the episode, but
this has come out since
it came out in an article like a week and a half. 2
he
weeks ago.
He did an interview.
He did do an interview.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for anyone who has not watched the original 4 episodes, I would like to think you have if you're listening to this. In the very beginning of the documentary, Mark Summers is interviewed because Mark Summers was, in many ways, he was the face of Nickelodeon
For a long
in the
time.
late 80s, very early 90s. He was the host of Double Dare. He was the host of What Would You Do? And he was sort of like, he would go out and he would be the guy who would promote
He was
Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon's dad at the time.
Pretty
Like
much.
he was that guy, that wholesome. He was the image that Nickelodeon should have had and should have maintained and should have been.
Yeah. And he just has that, quick recap of what Nickelodeon was. And then we get into what the documentary is about. And that's when they introduce the videos, especially the one of Ariana Grande spilling water on herself and basically making moaning sounds. And there is this just very powerful like shot of him
Holding the phone.
holding the iPad, watching this, and he just looks up and he just goes, "Was this aired on Nickelodeon?"
Yeah.
And that's it. And that you don't see him again for the remainder of the documentary. Come to find out, right after that, he is like, "Yo, like, what the f? Like,
What am I doing here?
What am
Like,
I doing here? You didn't tell me what this was about."
Yeah, so I
And-
guess they brought him in under the pretense that they were going to be talking about the early days of Nickelodeon and
Yeah.
some of the things behind the scenes. And apparently that shot of him saying, "This really aired," like 2 seconds later, he
got
ended up walking out.
He walked off the set.
So he's come out since and he was like, "This was not what I was told." And I was not involved with any of this stuff. Dan Schneider was well past my time. The only ones he said he knew were Keenan and Kel. Like those are the only two that he worked with.
Well, if he worked with Keenan and Kel, then Dan Schneider was around Nickelodeon.
But he didn't.
But he didn't work with
He
him.
never interacted with him.
Yes, it's like I knew nothing of what was going on here.
So he kind of fired at the producers for in his words, misleading. They did say like that wasn't our intention. We thought we were clear with what we said, but I get it. They want to get they needed somebody from Nickelodeon. And I'm not saying that they did anything maliciously. They needed
They wanted somebody who could talk about what Nickelodeon was and what it what it was originally meant to be. And
Yeah.
and as I stated in the previous episode, if you want to hear about what Nickelodeon was and how it got started, watch The Orange Years on Hulu. It is a fantastic documentary about the creation of Nickelodeon and what Nickelodeon was and what it was through the early 90s. This is sadly what Nickelodeon became. Because again, this is not just about Dan Schneider. This is about a network,
A culture
that this guy created, and the network just saw dollar signs and was like, "Do whatever you please."
Yeah.
Between the lawyers making the parents leave when they tell them that Brian Peck has been arrested, to the point where all this stuff is happening, and Nickelodeon, just had that little bubble at the end of every episode. We strive to have a,
So
yada, yada, yada.
Nickelodeon has not come out since.
They have not.
They have not
Yeah.
said a single word about all this. And what's even more the biggest, most messed up part of all of this was during the Brian Peck trial, Drake Bell says Dan Schneider was the only person that supported him during this from Nickelodeon.
From Nickelodeon.
What?
And he has openly admitted, like, I never viewed any bad thing with Dan in terms of, treating me badly, treating people around me badly. He was like, I can only attest to what I saw. He said it was hard for him to watch the other remaining episodes of the show, not just his stuff, obviously, but like he didn't know anything about that stuff.
Right.
And, I don't think he still talks to Dan, but he admits like Dan was the only one that reached out to me and was like, actually wanted to know if I was okay.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know if Dan was doing that to cover his ass. You can assume that. I'm not going to assume that. I mean, I would like to think, yes, he's a despicable guy, what he did, but was he covering a pedophile? I won't go that far to accuse him of that, but it wouldn't shock me.
I think there was a degree of self-preservation.
It probably was. I will fully admit there probably was. But you know what? In Drake Bell's eyes, Dan was the only one that stood up for him besides his parents. Yeah. And you know what? That's horrible. That is hard.
You know what? We'll end on a higher note. Speaking of parents, you got
no, go.
Are we there? Are we there?
Yeah,
are we there? All right, we're there.
there.
We're there. It's like we've got one brain. One of the biggest things that we learned was Brian Hearn. Him and his mother had a huge falling out with this because, like Drake Bell's father, she was well aware that things were not right on the set. She did not like that the parents were excluded. She would speak up for her son. She was like, "This isn't right." Blah blah blah. So when he was removed from his contract and not brought back, they stopped talking.
Yeah.
He was 13, and she said he turned into an adult in that second, and I lost him. They spent years not talking to each other, but this documentary brought them back. And some of the most powerful stuff was watching them react to each other's bits
Interviews.
and then being brought back together.
Yeah, that was good to see. It was tough to watch, but also very good to see.
Yeah.
And it also got me, it made me angry because they were in the office of Brian's agents, and you would think Brian's agents, I don't know who they were, I have no idea, one person, two people, I don't know, uh, saying, "Oh, hey, all that's not going to bring you back," and they could probably sense that he was upset at his mom. You think they could step in and be like, "No, it's not your mom's fault. This is just how things are done."
But you know what? I hate to say it. In their world, it was his mom's fault
Yeah,
because
but
she was an obstacle on the set.
yeah,
And I'm
but then
sure.
they should have known the same things that she knew,
Yeah.
and shame on them.
It
'Cause,
is a shame. And I'm
um,
glad, though, like we said, this
that's
document.
20 years. 20 years
I talk to
that
I talk to
rift
my mom every week.
that rift apparently caused, to the point where it aired, or they said they texted each other happy Valentine's Day, something,
That's what
or
started
they knew they were being interviewed or something like that. But yeah, that to think that caused that, but and how it just caused that rift between them is just, it's horrible.
I'm hoping that we get more from this and more good comes out of it. We're going to hear more horror stories.
We're gonna hear more horror stories, not necessarily maybe just from Nickelodeon, but from other things. I mean, we have what's her name from The Big Bang Theory? Maya Balak.
Oh yeah.
She's like, this just wasn't Nickelodeon. This was happening all over the place.
Yes, I would love to hear. I don't want to say love. I would be very curious to hear stories from Disney. I would be curious to hear stories from network television that
Yeah.
employed kids. Like
Maybe the teen shows that were on Saturday mornings, like Saved by the Bell, or
well, they did. Remember when they did
I don't.
Screech's story?
Well, that was Screech's book,
yeah, his
which was
perspective.
total BS.
Yeah. But even like the Brady Bunch, like he did his tell-all book about some of the things that were happening behind the scenes. But like again,
There was nothing
nothing crazy.
There was nothing like
And every
terrible in those stories.
And the problem with memoirs is that every other cast member, it's one-sided, and every other cast member typically is like, that's not how it was.
Yeah.
But we would love to hear your thoughts on Quiet on the Set and some of the Disney Channel stories, the Nickelodeon stories that you guys would like to hear or that you guys have heard. So make sure you guys leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you guys want more of our content, you can go to our website, themisfitfaction.com. I actually did an article about Quiet on the Set, so you can check that out there. And we're on all the social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. Just type in MF Uncensored or The Misfit Faction. Odds are you'll find some of our stuff. But I think, Sean, that is going to wrap us up for today.
That was a tough one, definitely. Hopefully, again, as you said, we see some change, and we'll go from there.
But in the meantime, I'm Paul.
I'm Sean.
And we'll see you guys next time.